Under the wide sky of our village, my brother raised his voice and took our mother's fields, saying, "Girls don't inherit." I stood with trembling hands and steady heart. This is how truth walked into daylight, how wisdom sat in a circle, and how land remembered our mother's quiet promise. Please like, subscribe, and share this story. Add your thoughts in the comments to keep wisdom walking with us today. I was born between red earth and green breath, where our fields opened like a book my mother read aloud with her hands. My earliest memory is her hoe tapping the ground in a steady rhythm, soft as a drum heartbeat, quiet drum heartbeat. The sound told me when to wake, when to gather water, and when to watch seeds sink into their beds. The ground smelled damp and alive, like a fresh woven mat brought in from the sun. I learned to listen. The field taught me its moods. The way tall millet bent when the wind carried news from the hills, the way the cassava leaves glistened after night rain, and the way birds gathered like a choir when the first fruits were ready. My mother said, "The land hears you when you care for it." She smiled with a nod, and the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes caught the light like silver threads. We were 2 children in her small house with cool mud walls and a roof that sang when the rain began. Kojo was my older brother by 3 years. He walked faster than the rest of us, even when there was no hurry. He learned from our mother, too. He learned to trade at the market and to carry heavy baskets across the bridge without spilling a single mango. He learned to stand in a crowd and call out prices with a confident tone that made people look twice. I learned the field itself. I learned the thin stream that woke in the rainy season and slept during harmattan. I learned the taste of the soil near the mango tree, more red than brown, a fine dust that clung to the fingers. I could find the flat stone where our mother sharpened her hoe even with my eyes closed, just by smelling the iron and earth. On the last evening before my mother's illness grew heavy, she and I walked to the far corner where wild marigold flowers pressed their faces toward the setting sun. She wore her yellow cloth, the one with tiny triangles that looked like folded birds. She stopped by the boundary stone that was shaped like a shoulder. "Here," she said, touching it with the back of her fingers. "When I am gone, guard this land. It has guarded us." I felt my throat close. The sky was soft, and a line of cranes flew home like a thread across the silver light. I wanted to ask her to stay forever. Instead, I asked a smaller question. "How do I guard it?" She looked at me with that gentle, steady way that never rushed. "By listening, by sharing, by remembering what feeds everyone." Then she took off her scarf and tied it around my wrist. It smelled like her soap, like shea and ash, clean and warm. We went home the slow way so that we could keep talking. I did not know then that it was the last time she would walk to that corner. After the funeral, the house took on a quiet that even roosters could not break. People came to sit with us. They told stories of my mother at the well, of how she could balance laughter on her head with a full water pot. The fields were waiting, too. I went at dawn and touched the soil. It felt tired, like a friend who had stayed up all night keeping watch with me. I promised the land that I would keep the baskets full. On the 3rd morning after we buried my mother, Kojo came to the field. He had a new brown hat and eyes that avoided mine for a moment before meeting them. He carried a stick in his right hand. He traced a line in the dust. "Sister," he said, "from here to the mango is mine now." The sun had climbed a little, not yet fierce, and my shadow leaned to one side. I thought I had misheard. "What do you mean?" I asked. He lifted his chin. "Girls do not inherit." He said it as if it were old law written into the bark of our oldest tree. The words landed like stones on a resting bird. "Mother said," I started. He cut me off, not with anger, but with a firmness that left no room for breath. "Mother is gone. I am the son. I am the one who must keep the name on solid ground. You can take the kitchen garden. I will handle the fields." He moved the boundary stone with his foot. It slid a little, grating against the dry grass. I watched the dust rise from the stone's side like a sigh. My hands curled around the handle of the hoe. I was quiet. A bee circled near my ear and then wandered off. Kojo bent, still tracing the line. "This is how it is," he said. Everyone knows. The words pricked my skin. I walked to the flat sharpening stone and touched it to steady myself. I took a careful breath. Kojo, I said, and my voice was low so that it would not break. We both know the land. Mother loved both of us. Let us speak with the council. Let us sit where wisdom sits. His eyes flashed. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that shields a wound. Wisdom? He asked as if the word were fragile. You think the council will break tradition for you? Do not shame us. Be content with the yard. Plant your greens. I will manage the large work. He lifted his stick and turned toward the mango tree, as if to measure it by steps. I wanted to reach out and stop him, but my hand would not move. I looked at the land itself, at the small clumps of soft grass where crickets hid, at the ants moving in a line across the dry path. The mango tree's leaves were silver on their undersides where the light touched them. That night I could not sleep for long. I would wake, feel my mother's scarf around my wrist, and lie still listening to the wind tap the eaves. The house spoke small sounds, as if it could not find its own dreams either. In the deep of the night, I sat up and looked toward the window. The stars were clear. I whispered my mother's name and then the names of the plants in our field, the way I used to whisper them as a child to help me learn. Millet, cassava, beans, sorghum, spinach. Their names made a string that I could hold. I remembered something my mother used to say when she settled a small quarrel between cousins. She would say, "Truth may walk slowly, but it does not walk backward." It is a simple proverb, and it stayed with me like a warm cup held between both palms. I tucked it close to my heart and closed my eyes. In the morning, I went to see Auntie Mara. She was not our aunt by blood, but she knew every family's stories, and her small, lean frame carried more quiet power than some men carried with big voices. Her courtyard smelled like roasted groundnuts and drying clothes. She was pounding peppers when I entered. "Nia," she said, her eyes soft and sharp at the same time. "Sit." I told her what had happened. I spoke slowly, not to cause wound to open wider than it already had. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she set down her pestle. "I heard of this from the wind," she said. "Our village has a path. Some people still think daughters cannot step on it. But we have decided as a people that care is stronger than custom when custom forgets its heart." She wiped her hands on a cloth and gave me water. "Go to the council," she said. "Go with steady feet. Do not use sharp words, for sharp words draw blood even in the mouth that speaks them. Go and let the elders ask the land itself." I nodded. Her words felt like shade on a hot day. "Will Kojo come?" I asked. She gave a small smile. "If he does not, I will send my boy to fetch him, and perhaps the wind will help." When I left Auntie's, I walked past the well. The sound of the rope sliding against wood made my teeth ache and also soothed me. 2 girls were laughing, each holding a bucket, water sloshing as if it wished to run back to where it came from. They reminded me of my brother and me when we were small, when our fights were about who got the larger ribbon, not whose foot stood on which part of the field. I felt that ache you feel when the past steps into the present and looks straight at you. I closed my eyes and breathed, letting the smells of soap and wet earth settle in. I found Kojo by the market shade where men cut wood and spoke about politics and football. He was sitting on a low stool, his hat pushed back, a handful of peanuts in his palm. "Brother," I said. He looked up. For a moment, the boy who used to pinch me lightly behind my arm to make me laugh at nothing at all peeked out from his face. "What is it?" he asked, softer than before. "Come to the council with me," I said. "Let's sit and let them listen to both of us. Let us ask the land to speak through them." He frowned, but it did not have the same hard edge. He tipped his peanuts into his mouth, chewed, and swallowed. "Nia," he said, "do not take what belongs to me. I am not your enemy, but I am the eldest son. Everything I have learned tells me this is my burden. If the council tells me otherwise, I will hear, but do not expect the sky to turn over." His words were mixed with warning and a small opening. "Tomorrow," I said, "under the fig where the council sits, when the sun is one hand above the tree." He nodded, then looked away, as if the ground in front of him held a different conversation he wanted to follow. That evening, I swept the yard slowly and fed the hen that had started visiting since my mother's passing, as if it also missed her. The hen skipped sideways at the sight of the broom and then settled, clucking to herself. I washed my face and braided my hair, listening to the night slip around the house like a shawl. I sang one of my mother's planting songs softly under my breath. It did not chase away worry, but it stood beside it like a friend. I touched the scarf on my wrist, smelled the faint soap scent still there, and lay down on my mat. My sleep was full of slow rivers and tall grass and the soft sound of a council drum calling people together. At dawn, the sky was a pale band behind the trees. I made porridge and put aside a small bowl, as my mother did, as a thank you for care received. When I reached the fig, the long shadow of its branches was still cool. 3 elders were already there. Elder Moyo, who had a long, slow way of speech that made people lean in to catch every word. Mama Sade, whose eyes missed nothing, and who could hush a noisy crowd with a cough. And Uncle Jaro, who smiled easily, but was harder than he looked when fairness was a guest at the table. They sat on low chairs, and the usual large gourd of water waited between them. The ground under the fig was swept clean. My heart knocked softly. I greeted them and sat. Birds hopped in the lowest branches. The air felt like it knew something and would reveal it if we waited. Kojo came. I was relieved to see him. He greeted the elders with respect. He did not look at me at first, but when he did, his eyes were not unkind. More people gathered, keeping a respectful distance. 2 of our neighbors stood near the back, their expressions careful. The fig held our small circle as a calabash holds water. Elder Moyo cleared his throat. "We are here," he said, "not to win or lose. We are here to set a load down on the right shelf so that it will not fall on anyone. Speak with care." His voice was neither warm nor cold. It was steady, and it made the air settle. He looked at Kojo. "Son," he said, "tell us what brings you to our ground today." Kojo stood and spoke plainly. "Our mother is gone. I am the eldest son. I have taken the fields for care and for duty. My sister may plant by the house. Everyone knows that daughters marry and move away. The land must stay with me." He did not shout. He did not boast. He spoke in the way a person speaks when he believes his words are as familiar as the names of the days. Some nodded. Some did not. Uncle Jaro leaned forward. "Are you saying your sister is not your family?" Kojo shook his head quickly. "Of course she is." Mama Said's eyes softened at that, and I felt a tiny loosening inside me. Then Elder Moyo turned to me. "Daughter," he said, "speak." I stood. My legs felt like long stalks with birds perched at the top, ready to fly away. I did not carry a speech in my pocket. I carried images. I carried mornings and evenings, seasons and small tasks. "Our mother," I began, and my voice wavered once before finding the small, strong line inside it, "taught us both. She told me to guard the land by listening, sharing, and remembering what feeds everyone. I am not here to take from my brother. I am here to keep her words and to keep the field whole. I know every corner. I know where the soil turns soft near the stream. I know where the big stone sits like a shoulder. I do not want to break our home. I want to honor it." I looked at Kojo and found his eyes. "We can care for it together. If the council says it belongs only to one, then let them say it because of truth, not because of my being a woman." Silence followed, like a held breath. Mama Said lifted her hand. "Our village has spoken on this matter before," she said. "Care weighs more than custom when custom forgets its heart." There was a murmur. Uncle Jaro did not look at anyone but the ground, which was easier to read than faces sometimes. "We will not decide with tongues alone," he said. "We will ask the land to answer. You will both show us what you know. You will show us where the field begins and ends. You will show us how the land calls your names." A soft wind passed through the fig leaves. It felt like agreement. We decided to meet at the field at noon, when the sun would throw short shadows. Elder Moyo looked at us both. "Speak no harsh words before then," he said. "And remember, as the old saying goes, when the roots drink, the leaves sing." He smiled at that. It was one of his favorites. I held that proverb like a smooth stone in my pocket as I walked home. Kojo walked the other way. We did not speak. I wanted to run after him and say something simple like, "Let us eat together before this," or, "Do you remember when we got lost and Mother found us by calling like a dove?" But I did not. The day's work lay in front of us, and the fig's shade stayed behind, cool and steady. I went to the house and sat with the scarf in my hands. The thread pulled through my fingers. I could smell my mother's soap again, faint but present. I whispered a small prayer, not to ask for a miracle, but to ask for calm. May my words be soft but strong. May my eyes see clearly. May my ears catch what is true. I watched the sunlight move across the floor and thought about the stream that slept most of the year and woke in the rains. It came when it was called. I hoped truth would come the same way, steady and clear, even if it had to wind around stones to arrive. The sun climbed like a careful hand up the day. By noon, it sat above us, small and bright, drawing shorter shadows and pulling a deep scent from the earth, as if the ground itself had warmed sugar inside. People gathered at the edge of our fields, quiet but curious. Some leaned on hoes, some stood with arms folded as if they were waiting for rain. The council arrived and sat under the nearest shade, a tall shade tree that hummed with bees. They kept their distance so they could see without our words tugging their ears. Elder Moyo spoke first. "Take us around the land," he said. "Each of you will lead once. Let your feet remember. Let us watch." His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It settled on the air like a calm hand. Kojo stepped forward. He looked steady, and I could see that steadiness was not an act. He knew the land, too. He pointed to the west where the old tamarind stood, its bark like folded maps. "From there," he said, "to the mango, then over the ridge to the anthill that looks like a sleeping goat." He walked, and we followed. His steps were sure. I noticed the places his eyes glanced as he moved. They counted trees, stones, dips in the ground. When he reached the anthill, he touched it with his stick like a greeting. Uncle Jaro nodded, his face unreadable. Mama Sade bent once to pick a small leaf and rub it between her fingers, releasing a sharp smell like lemon. We completed the circle and came back to where we had started. Sweat stood on Kojo's forehead. He did not wipe it. He folded his arms and looked toward me. I stepped ahead. The land greeted my feet in a way that made my chest ache with gratitude. I pointed toward the same tamarind tree and the same mango. But when I reached the ridge, I bent and showed them a small pile of shells. White snail shells that our mother had tucked at the edge of a stone years ago to mark a corner. I had placed my hand there 100 times without thinking. Now I set my palm on it and felt the coolness of the shells. "Mother hid these when I was little," I said. She said, "If someone moves the stone, the shells still tell the truth." The elders leaned in. Mama Sade's eyes softened. "Who else knows this?" she asked. "The land and me," I said. A tiny stir moved through the watchers. Kojo's mouth tightened, not in anger, but in concern. He had not known. It was not his fault. He had learned other things. I saw that in his face the way you see a bird fly across a bright sky. Quick, clear, then gone. We moved on. Where Kojo had walked straight to the mango, I turned slightly and pointed to a small grove of wild herbs, their scent rising as we stepped close. "This is where Mother taught me to cut tiny bundles to flavor stew," I said. She said the edge of our field borrows their shade. Uncle Jaro knelt and pressed his palm to the soil. He did that 3 more times as we walked, as if he could listen through his skin. At the anthill, I touched it too. I looked up and saw a hawk turning slow circles above us, patient and sure. When we ended where we began, Elder Moyo stood and stretched his back. "Both of you know this land," he said. "Both of you stand on it with history." He looked toward our neighbors. "Who can remember the older boundaries?" A woman named Cade, who had lived beside us since I could walk, lifted her hand. "I remember when your mother and I planted cotton here one year to see if it would take," she said. "We placed a row of small stones that year to mark our own edge. Some are still there." She led us to the east edge, and yes, the stones, half sunk and shy under grass, still lay in a curved line. Kojo looked at them, then at me. He was not hard, only set in a shape that had been given to him by those before him. I felt compassion rise in me despite everything. The council did not speak for some time. They let the land and our footsteps finish their words. Then Mama Sede said, "We have walked. We have heard stories in the ground. Now we will ask for care to speak. Each of you will take a small corner today. Use water carefully, remove weeds, and bring us something from your corner that tells a true story. Not a grand story, a true one." She looked at both of us, her gaze even. "We will return when the light turns soft." I bowed my head. Kojo nodded, his jaw tight. The watchers drifted back to their own work, leaving a circle of quiet around us. I went to the corner near the small stream, even though it was only a ribbon of damp place this time of year. I knelt and pressed my ear to the ground, the way I used to as a child. It felt cool there, a slight hush under the thin crust of dryness. I loosened the weeds with my fingers, careful not to disturb the small sorghum shoots. The dirt under my nails made small moons. I remembered my mother's hands beside mine just like this, and the way she would hum the same phrase when she found a stubborn root, a sound like patience more than a song. I fetched water, one gourd at a time, and poured it slow so it would sink deep, not run off. When I finished, I sat with my back against the mango and closed my eyes for a moment to feel the breeze gather itself and cross the field. It picked up the smell of crushed leaves and the warm stone. I listened for what else might speak. A tiny gray lizard appeared and paused on a rock like a visitor announcing itself. Its scales shimmered. The air shifted again, and I heard laughter coming from the path. 2 children ran past chasing a goat that had stolen their wrap. Their laughter fell into the field like a handful of pale seeds. I felt affection for that laughter. It belonged in our place. It was one of the reasons we cared for the land, to make space where such sounds could be held without fear. When the shadow of the shade tree had lengthened, I stood and looked at my small corner. The soil had darkened with the water. The weeds lay in a neat pile to the side, each root freed. I dug with my fingers and found a worm, fat and slow, and I smiled at its presence. The land was alive. I chose a handful of damp soil, not too much, and shaped it gently into a ball. I pressed it in my hand until it held together. Then, almost without thinking, I walked to the boundary stone shaped like a shoulder and placed my ear against it. Coolness seeped into my skin. I pulled away and laughed softly at myself. Who listens to stones? But then again, maybe all good listeners find themselves listening to strange things. As I walked back to the elders, I saw Kojo from a distance. He had chosen the corner near the tamarind, where the soil was less kind and needed more water to soften its heart. He had cleared the weeds. He carried a bundle of long grasses tied with a thin vine and a small bowl with something inside. His steps were heavy but exact. When we reached the council, the air had changed. It held that late afternoon hush that always made me feel like taking another breath just to keep it close. Soft evening light. Elder Moyo looked at us both. "What did you bring?" Kojo stepped forward first, placing his bundle on the ground. "I brought this grass," he said. "Mother taught me to twist it for rope when we had no spare twine. And I brought this the dry pods from last season. They show seed still, ready if you look." He held up the small bowl, and indeed, in it lay 3 dry pods that rattled when he shook them gently. Mama Sade nodded. "You brought use," she said. "You brought memory of hands making what is needed." I stepped forward and opened my hand. The small ball of damp soil sat like a dark pearl. "I brought soil," I said, my voice low because even the soil's darkness seemed to ask for quiet. "I cannot carry the stream. I cannot carry the mango's shade. I can carry what feeds all of it." I shut my hand and opened it again. The soil kept its shape. It was simple and still. Uncle Jero reached out and took a bit, rolling it between his fingers. "It holds," he said, not to me but to the air, as if to note it somewhere careful. He picked a small leaf from the grass Kojo had brought and wrapped it in part of the damp soil. "Together," he said, and his voice was threaded with a thought he did not yet speak in full. The elders sat silent for a long moment. I watched the way the light traced the small lines on their faces, tiny maps of other judgments, other harvests, other times when truth needed help finding its place to sit. Then Elder Moyo spoke. "Care weighs more than custom when custom forgets its heart," he said, echoing Mama Sade's words from that morning. But our work is not finished by a saying. We must be sure we do not harm a foundation while building a roof. He looked at Kojo. "You worry that if the land goes to your sister, the family root will be cut." Kojo nodded, the relief at being seen softening his face. "You worry that if it goes to your brother alone, your mother's final request will be lost inside a closed gate," he said to me. I nodded, the same relief washing through me like cool water after a hot walk. "Then here is what we will do," he said. He stood and walked to the mango tree himself. He pressed his hand against its bark. "Tomorrow at sunrise we will return. You will both lead us once more around the field, but this time in silence. After that, we will ask 3 witnesses to speak. The neighbor who planted cotton with your mother, the well-keeper who watched you both fetch water for seasons, and the teacher who saw who missed school to help in the field. We will weigh all of this with a proverb you have heard before. Truth is a fire. You cannot cover it with dry leaves." He looked at us in turn. "Let it burn clean." I felt a tightness in my chest loosen again. The test was fair. It asked more than words. It asked time and memory and simple witness. Kojo's shoulders lowered slightly, as if he had set down a sack of yams and finally knew how heavy it had been. "We will come," he said. His voice had lost its hard rim. It was his voice from years ago, the one he used to tell me stories about brave children who found their way home in the dark. We walked home the long way again, because the day asked for it. The sky was clear and deep. Cranes were already thinking about home, their wings making a soft sound like cloth being folded. I wanted to walk beside Kojo and find the words that could hold both our fears and both our love. I did not. I walked a few paces behind, watching his back, remembering the time he had carried me across the flooded path when I was little, setting me down on the dry side and then going back for our basket. That memory felt like a small lantern inside me. At home, I cooked simple food and ate with slow bites. I left some in a small bowl for my mother's memory and set it near the door. The night came with a whisper. I lay down but did not sleep right away. The air smelled like dry leaves and cool stone. The moon rolled slowly. I thought about the tomorrow we were walking toward, about silence and witnesses and what the land had to say when people stopped talking over it. In that quiet, I felt my mother's hand, not touching me, but near, like a blessing held just above the head so that its warmth was present without pressing. Just before dawn, a light breeze slid under the door. It carried the smell of water that had traveled a long way over ground. I sat up and smiled in the dark. Some things keep their promises without speaking. I braided my hair again in a neater line and washed my face while the first birds began their clear, patient calls, birdsong. I tied the scarf on my wrist, breathed out, and stepped into the slow light. The fig's shade felt like a doorway we moved through together. The elders were already there, their faces calm. They greeted us with the same steady hands and eyes. "Today we listen," said Mama Sade. "Even the dust has something to say if you let it settle." She smiled just a little and nodded at our path. Kojo and I moved side by side, but not touching, like 2 branches from the same root reaching for air. We made the silent circle. The tamarind, the mango, the ridge, the ant hill. We did not speak. The world spoke enough. Feet in the dirt, the smell of a lizard's path, a cricket singing from low in the grass. We ended where we began and sat on the ground. The witnesses came forward. Cade spoke of stones and cotton planting, and the way my mother used to laugh when a row came out crooked, and then straighten it with a gentle hand. The well-keeper, a serious man with kind eyes, told how he had watched me carry 2 buckets before dawn while Kojo left for market, and how then Kojo would return in the evening to bring our mother chairs to sit outside, so both of us had carried in our way. The teacher spoke of days I missed school to harvest, and of days Kojo missed to help lift harvest baskets when a storm threatened. He did not praise one over the other. He simply made a path of facts we could walk on. The elders listened, heads bent, hands still. Elder Moyo lifted his face to the sky as if asking the light itself for a small nod. Then he looked at us again. "We will speak tomorrow," he said. "Not to stretch your hearts, but to ensure they return to beating at a regular pace." He looked at Kojo and then at me. "Go home. Eat. Think of what you will do with the truth when it is in your hands." We rose. The people drifted back. Kojo and I walked a little way together this time. He stopped by the path where a cluster of small blue flowers grew among weeds, their petals open like eyes. "Do you remember," he said, "the day Mother sent us to bring back a handful of fish, and we ate half on the way because they smelled so good, and then we lied and said the fishermen had fewer than we thought?" I laughed for the first time in days, and it came out like a small cough. "She knew," I said. We both smiled. The world felt like a place where things could turn right. We walked the rest of the way home in a quiet that warmed instead of bit. Morning arrived with light that moved like a blessing across the doorframe. I swept the yard, feeling each small dust swirl catch on the broom and then yield. I washed my face and combed my hair, hearing the teeth of the comb click like counting beads. When I reached the fig, many were already there. The air had a tune to it, low but steady. The elders sat as before, with the gourd of water between them. People stood in a wide ring, holding their voices under their tongues. Elder Moyo began. "We have walked, watched, and listened," he said. "We have seen where stones keep truths even when hands push them. We have heard how both of you have carried your mother in different ways. One to the field, one to the market, both to the place where the day ends with bread on the table." He took a sip of water and passed the gourd to Mama Sade, who let it rest on her knee. "We have a duty," he said, "not only to two children but to a way of living that must hold because it is fair." He looked at us both. "Daughter, you will inherit the field as your mother asked. Son, you will share its care and its fruit, as you have shared its labor and its shade. The land is not a knife to cut the family. It is a mat to sit on." He raised his hand. "We do not say this to please either of you. We say it because the land itself answered. The hidden shells, the old line of stones, the long memory of those who watched, all point one way. And our rules, made by the community, say daughters inherit the same as sons. Girls don't inherit is not our truth." A murmur passed through the people, a sound like leaves brushing each other when a fresh breeze arrives. Kojo's mouth tightened for a moment, then softened. He lowered his gaze, then brought it back up and met mine. His eyes were glossed with what he was carrying inside. I stepped forward and bowed my head. "Thank you," I said, not loud, not hidden. My voice felt like it had found its weight and its shape. Uncle Jarrow stood and walked to the mango tree. He tied a length of bright cord around its trunk, high so that it would not be cut by goats or children's curious fingers. "This is for memory," he said. "Not memory of this decision alone, but memory of what is right when strong habits try to tell us otherwise." He turned to us. "Now how will you live?" His question landed like a bird that had chosen a branch carefully and was now leaning into it. I looked at Kojo. "Brother," I said, "you know how to speak with traders, to save, to plan for lean times. I know how to read the ground, to plant, to bring water the slow way so it sinks and does not run. Our mother tied both of those in her life. Let us tie them too. Let us keep the field whole. Let us sell together. Let us set aside a corner each season for a neighbor who failed to harvest, the way Mother used to when she thought no one was looking." I swallowed once. "Let us build without cutting." Kojo looked at me, and the weight in his eyes shifted from defense to relief. He sighed, a careful breath that came from deep and left lighter than when it arrived. "I was afraid," he said, his voice plain, his dignity intact. "Afraid that without the land in my hands, I would lose my title as the man who kept our name steady. But I hear what is true. We both keep our mother's name steady. I accept the council's words. I accept yours. I am sorry for moving the stone." He looked at the elders first. Then he looked at me. He was not broken. He was standing, and standing well. Mama Sade stood. She placed her hand on Kojo's shoulder and then on my head. "The land is a mirror," she said. It shows us who we are when we stand before it. Today, it shows you both ready to be better than you were yesterday." She smiled, a quiet curve that held warmth without spilling it. "Go now and mark the corners together. Plant a living fence of shrubs, the kind that fruit in the lean months, so your boundaries feed the hungry, not just the eyes." Her words felt like a gift tied in cloth and handed with both hands. We walked to the field together, followed at a distance by those who wanted to witness the beginning of the next part of our story. We chose small shrubs with red berries, sturdy and patient, and we placed them in a line where the stones and shells and old feet had already drawn truth. The soil gave way under our fingers and then held them as we pressed each plant in. I could feel Kojo's breath near mine when he leaned forward to set a plant straight. Our hands brushed once. It did not sting. It felt like a bridge being built. As we worked, I remembered a small moment from childhood I had not thought of in years. I had been sick with a fever, and my mother had lit a tiny fire to warm water. Kojo had sat beside me for once quiet, holding a cup and waiting for me to wake enough to sip. He had not told me to be brave. He had not told me anything. He had simply waited and watched me breathe, as if that was the whole work of the world that night. The memory settled around me now like a shawl. We finished planting the living fence and stood back. It looked like a soft line drawn with a gentle hand, not a hard wall. The elders nodded from where they stood on the path. The sun climbed slowly and made the berries bright. Children came close to look and then ran off to play, their feet light on the path, their voices carrying small joy notes. That evening we cooked together. Kojo brought cassava from the store. I brought greens and spice from the small garden by the kitchen. We cooked in silence at first, then in the kind of easy talk that lives on the other side of struggle when something true has found its chair in the room. We spoke about when to plant the next rows, about the market woman who would pay well for fresh greens if you brought them early, about the plan to repair the small wall near the stream that guided water better. We did not talk about hurt except once when I said carefully, "Please, next time, come to me before moving the stone." He nodded. "I will," he said. That simple promise held more power than many loud ones. In the days that followed, the village settled back to its rhythm. The council sat under the fig on other matters. The elders spoke a little about our case when young men asked bold questions at the well, and their answers were clear. The story traveled as stories do. It changed shape as it moved, but the heart remained. Daughters stood straighter. Sons walked with more thoughtful feet. It was not a new law. It was an old truth, cleaned and brought into the sun where everyone could see its face. A month later, the first fruits came at the edge of the living fence, small red beads glowing among green. We picked a few and gave them to the children who had watched us plant, the ones with curious hands who had asked the best questions. They put the berries on their tongues and laughed at the burst of tart, sweet taste. We laughed with them. Our laughter rose and went out over the field like birds at morning. We marked the seasons together. The rains came, heavy at first, then polite, then heavy again, as if they could not decide which mood to keep. The field drank. The living fence settled its roots deeper. The ants found new paths among the shrubs. I taught Kojo the small signs the land gives when it needs attention. A dullness in the leaves, a sudden silence where birds should be, a change in the smell of the soil between afternoon and dusk. He taught me the market rhythms, how to blend baskets to make a sale, 2 heavy with cassava, 1 light with herbs, 1 just for show at the front, even though everything in it was for sale if someone truly wanted it. We became what our mother had been, 2 hands, different but joined. Now and then, someone would come by and ask if it was true that the council had ruled against the old saying. "Girls don't inherit," they would quote, as if testing the sound of the words against the air. Kojo would speak before I could. "That is not our way," he would say. "Care inherits, truth inherits, family inherits." He did not shout it. He said it as if reading a known line from a trusted book. Each time I felt a small warmth like a candle inside a hollow gourd, steady and useful. There is something else. On the day the harvest was large and the market was full, I went to the boundary stone shaped like a shoulder. I knelt and moved the small pile of shells, cleaned them with my fingers, and set them back with care. I pressed my ear against the stone again. It was cool. It said nothing, which was exactly what I hoped it would say. It was enough to feel the peace in that silence. When Harmattan came, bringing a fine dust that settled on everything like a thin blanket, we covered our mouths when we walked, and we blessed water in small cups. The field rested. The soil sighed and turned toward sleep. We mended the fence where a curious goat had nibbled too hard. We sat on the doorstep in late afternoon, watching the light slip from high gold to low blue. We told stories. Some were new. Most were old. I told one that started, under the wide sky. My brother took our mother's land, and at that point Kojo would interrupt and say, "And then he learned better," and we would both laugh, a laugh that did not bruise. It was a story we could hold because we had walked it to a good place. If you ask me now what justice feels like, I will say it feels like standing on warm soil after light rain, hearing birds argue softly in the trees, and knowing that tomorrow you will wake and step into a day that knows your name and does not turn its back. It feels like setting a basket down between two people and watching four hands reach in with easy trust. It feels like a proverb lived, not a proverb recited. It feels like truth without dust. Our mother's scarf finally lost her soap scent. The thread thinned. One day, it tore where it had been knotted around my wrist. I held the two ends and did not feel loss. I felt continuation. I tied one end to the mango, high where only birds would see it. I tied the other end to the new gate Kojo had built from smooth sticks, tied with rope he had woven from the grass he had chosen with his careful hands. When the wind moved, the two loose ends lifted, a quiet nod to each other across the space between. I think my mother would have liked that. I think she would have hummed her patient tune and then gone to fetch water just to mark the moment. Sometimes I still wake and worry for a breath or two. Old habits like to visit in the night. But then I hear the courtyard hens murmur and settle. I hear the small creak of the gate. I smell the dry leaf scent that comes from the shade tree at the edge. I breathe. I remember Elder Moyo's words. The land is a mat to sit on, and I see us there. Kojo, me, the elders, Auntie Mara, the children, the neighbors, sitting, eating, laughing, sometimes crying, always returning. And I know, as the proverb says and as we lived, truth is a fire. You cannot cover it with dry leaves. It burns clean, it warms, and if you let it, it cooks your evening meal so that you can eat together in peace. That is enough. That is everything.